Bubba. Come on, Bubba. Come on. It's time to eat. Come on. Come on, let's go. Come on, get out of bed. Let's go.
Okay, Bubba, sorry.
Welcome back everyone to another makeover video for Man's Possessed Friend. Thank you so much to our dog Tonga for being such a trooper. So we're going to start this off by mixing up some epoxy sculpt. You mix up equal parts, twist them around for about 2 minutes until the color is even, and then you wait 5 minutes until you start sculpting with them. I'm just going in and you can see the reference photo I'm working off of, and I'm trying to add some open wounds in some areas where the flesh has been ripped away from the dog. I think this sculpture is fantastic, and I'm really wanting to work with it and enhance it with just a few open wounds like the photograph. Think zombie dog from Resident Evil. And here's a photo as it's drying. And now I'm moving on. I'm just painting the wounds with a base layer of white and then taping off the mouth and eyes before I go back in by adding several layers of pink, red, purple, just kind of building up that muscle and what would be underneath the skin. I'm being very careful not to completely white out the places where the highlights would be, because that's where the bones are. Especially the top of the brow and the cheekbone. You want to make sure that those peek through and that they're bright, because we're going to go back through and add blood on top of this later. I approach the wounds like you would apply scar wax to a person, making sure to add the little rollies around the edges and then pressing them down to blend them with the skin, and being careful not to disturb the inside edge because you want it to look like the flesh has been rolled up and torn away from the bone and muscle underneath. Now I'm going to work on some more airbrushing with some of the dark shadows and some more purples. I'm also going in and adding some detail to the mouth with some pinks before going in and completely flattening out and adding a black base paint. I want it to look more like a Rottweiler. I know I can't pull off Doberman with the ears on this dog. And here's what it looks like before we go back in and add some fur. Now I'm going to be flocking all of the black parts. I'm mixing up some Aleene's tacky glue as well as some black pigment and some water. I'm going to go over the entire area that I want the hair to stick. I want to do this in one shot except for under the chin. Placing the clip, I'm using the static flocking gun to place the hair on the glue before it dries. The static flocking gun allows the hair fibers to stand straight up versus clumping up all over, creating a really nice fur effect. I'm going through and using an airbrush to clean off the areas. You'll notice I'm wearing a mask, and I highly recommend you don't do this in your homes because it's extremely messy and the fibers get everywhere. But it's a really awesome effect, and I'm really trying to play around with textures of furry and wet and slimy. Now I'm going to be moving on to all the side panels. I want to repaint the house to look like an old, kind of decrepit, abandoned doghouse, maybe whitewashed. I'm going to go through and use a flat black spray paint. I'm just working my way around all the pieces, being very sure to spray on the undersides of all the sculpts, so all the shingles and all of the siding on the sides, because that's really the shadowy area. I think this is probably one of Spirit's best painted props and sculpted props, to be honest. I really didn't have to mess with it, but I always wanted to create a zombie dog, so why not? Now moving on, I'm using a medium light brown paint, an exterior latex paint, and I'm just going through and dry brushing each panel. Like I said, this was sculpted really well, and I'm just going through and enhancing that wood texture that is already in these vacuum formed panels. And now moving on to the shingles on the roof, and this is just a base layer. It's kind of guiding me to show me where the texture is and where I want to fill in and enhance. I'm really working with these panels just to enhance them. Now I'm going back through and I'm going to be adding the whitewash to the siding. I'm just using a white paint. Again, I'm dry brushing from side to side, working with the grain and kind of building up the layers. I want this to look old. I don't want it to look fresh. One of the things I like to do as a final step is I like to dip my brush in some water and then really just kind of rub it back and forth and blend all of the colors together. I think that really helps sell the whitewash effect. I'm also doing a rub out on the sign. I wanted it to look darker, and then I went back in and added some bright highlights just to make it look a little more realistic, as well as darkened the Bubba letters. Here's the roof and the side before I start assembling. Now I'm going through and I'm just touching up all of the edges. I want to really reinforce all of the shingles and make sure they have a highlight on each one. That'll really help bring it out later when I go through an airbrush. I'm also going through and adding some nails to the Bubba sign, and then I'm going around and painting the underside of the roof just in case. It's not necessary, but I was down there, so why not? And last, I'm just going in and detailing the Bubba sign and adding some rust to the nail heads that I painted. Now time to cut up this horrible drape over the door. I absolutely hated ours the first year we had it. It did not function like the video. The dog, it seemed, always got caught in the curtains, so I wanted to completely redo them. I am adding burlap. I just think this is more fitting, and I don't want to use black fabric because obviously we've created this awesome, super scary black zombie dog. And now it's time to add some mud. Oh, that's our cat. He's hanging out with me. I'm adding mud using acrylic latex caulk with silicone in a tan color. I'm using a chip brush to apply it. I'm just squeezing it around the bottom and blobbing the texture on and dragging it up. I want it to look as if it rained and the mud splashed up. These are the chain that I made. It's just made out of plastic chain that I found in the garage and some EVA foam. I glued the two together and then spray painted them silver and hammered metal before I hot glued them onto the front. Now I'm going through and adding some rust with my favorite rust color. This is probably the only color that I actually pay for at Home Depot and don't buy from the leftover section. When I'm applying the rust, I like to do it with a sponge. It just creates a nice breakup texture. Moving on to the roof, I'm using some flat black paint in my favorite, the airbrush, to reinforce all the shadows. So underneath every shingle as well as in between. And now moving on to the side pieces, I'm just spraying the underside of all of the siding to make sure that it looks really three-dimensional. And now I'm going to spray around the opening and distress some of the burlap before moving on and applying some of the blood. I want it to look like this dog has just dragged something back in there. I don't want to go too crazy, and it turned out awesome. Really love how the roof looks. Now I'm going to move back to the dog's head, and using wet product from Fright Props, I'm going to be painting the nose, his mouth, as well as all the wounds. I want to get him shiny first before I go in and add all the permablood. I also made a little milk bone. Now to create the skin that I want to stretch over the one side of the face, I'm just using a plate and some mask latex. I'm blobbing it on the plate and then waiting and using a dryer to dry in between. Once it's dry, I'm going to go through an airbrush on top of that latex. I know it's hard to see, but it's on top of the plate. I'm just using a flesh color as well as some dark reds and some blues. I'm waiting 10 minutes before I go through and actually peel it off. I'm showing you what it looks like. I did it first and it didn't record, so this is a second one. I'm just using it as an example. I don't really want to add more skin to the other side. Now be very careful when you pull this up. You can add baby powder if you want. I didn't want to do that because I wanted it to stick to the pieces that I had added the wet product to earlier. And now I'm just showing you how I stretched it over the ear. Obviously that was an example. Really love how it looks, so now I'm going to go in with my airbrush. I'm going through with some purple paint and just kind of detailing the skin. Once again, I'm going back in with the wet product from Fright Props with a brush to go over all of the latex. It's flexible, so it works great on latex. While that dries, I'm going to move on to make a quick prop arm. I just had a skeleton hand and a pool noodle. I also had a shirt sleeve that I cut off. I just glued everything together with hot glue, airbrushed the fingers a little bit, and hot glued the milk bone that I created. After that, I just added a lot of permablood. I know, go figure. And more permablood. Don't tell my husband I'm doing this inside because I would get in so much trouble. But I like to apply permablood with a straw. I suck up a little bit in the end. Be careful when you do this. And then I blow it onto whatever I'm trying to spatter it on. I think it creates a really nice realistic pattern, and then I will enhance it with a brush. And here's what he looks like before we get him back in his doghouse.
Hey y'all, come here real quick. I want to show you something before we finish. So I'm sure many of you noticed that the doors sort of changed up from the original ones we did earlier. Now, I've absolutely hated the original doors on the man-possessed friend prop. Ours never worked like the one in the video. The one in the video, it almost looked like a curtain was being pulled up. Ours seemed to always get snagged, and it just bothered me. And I spent a ton of time painting this dog head and putting fur on it, so I really wanted to be able to see it. Well, it didn't end up working out, so what we did was we actually just sliced the burlap across the top. That way, these flaps are actually falsely attached to the little door flaps that open. There's no resistance, and the dog pops right out without any problems. And I like this solution so much better. Well, that's the makeover video for Man's Possessed Friend. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed doing it. Now, for this zombie fanatic, turning Man's Possessed Friend into a zombie dog was a dream project come true. Now, if you like this video, be sure to let us know and hit that like button, I don't know, somewhere down here. And if you're interested in any of our future makeover videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate the overwhelming support, and I hope everybody is staying safe and sane. Bye, y'all.
Yummy.
Ew.